Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Joe Meade is with me, and we are recapping the Peach Bowl between Indiana and Oregon. Joe, this one was not like the first meeting. Indiana rolls to a 56-22 victory. It started off with a pick six on the very first play by D'Angelo Pons. Oregon responds with a 14-play touchdown drive of their own. And then after that, it was all Indiana. But Joe, a lot of people had opinions coming into this one. Would Oregon be able to close the gap from the first meeting? And it was the opposite. Indiana executes at a level that Oregon has not seen this year, including when Indiana went there the first time. But what were some of your thoughts on this one?
To be Sean, and I think we kind of talked off air about this. This was the exact same game script, aside from Oregon responding right away to the Pods pick six as the Rose Bowl. The game was over at halftime. The game was really over in the middle of the second quarter. And it looked like Oregon hadn't been in a big game all year. And to be fair, they really hadn't. I mean, until the Texas Tech game, their arguably biggest game was the first matchup against Indiana. And from the get-go, just Indiana's offense. I think they punted once in the first half, and that was mainly a Mendoza fumble on that third down that caused that. Because if that play develops, based on how the rest of the game went with the starters in there, uh, I bet Indiana completes that pass somehow. The way Mendoza was slinging the ball around, a lot of people are going to blame the Tosh Lupoy and Will Stein. I thought Will Stein didn't call that bad a game. I just think up front, the one thing I was worried about for Oregon was Indiana's defensive front eviscerating them, and that happened even more so than what we saw in Eugene on October 11th. So obviously, you have to give Indiana a lot of credit, and I certainly do. I mean, that was a domination that we hadn't seen since last year when Ohio State, who won the national title, did the same thing to Oregon to the quarterfinal of the Rose Bowl. But to me, Sean, Oregon did have a lot of self-inflicted wounds. Let's face it. They had the pick six, they had the fumble via the running back, friendly fire is what y'all call that. And then on defense, I thought they played coverage, decent coverage on a lot of the throws Mendoza made. He also played a heck of a game and showed why he's the Heisman winner, probably will be the number one pick. But too many times there's soft coverage. Guys were streaking open within 10 to 15 yards. And Indiana's offense, I know they had six or like 6 to 8 pre-snap penalties. It didn't feel it felt like that didn't even matter because they were so efficient. And if you give Indiana 10 to 15 yards, they have no problem scoring because they're not going to commit many penalties or many costly ones at that.
Yeah, it seems like that you have got to play a perfect game to be in the game with Indiana, and ultimately they gave them at least 14 points. You can argue 21. I mean, the pick six and then the RPO where Moore's trying to pull it and he fumbles, and then the Indiana guy falls on it on the 4 yard line, and then they score. But Oregon didn't really stand a chance if they did that. But Joe, I think that response drive from Oregon really reminded me of what Notre Dame did to Ohio State last year. Notre Dame opened up that game with a really hard fought long drive where their quarterback was taking big hits, and it was like, man, so much went right there. And it still took them 14 plays to go down the field and score. They had two third and long conversions, one of which probably shouldn't have stood, missed penalty, and then they ultimately scored the touchdown on the second one. But sort of my feeling in that one was, wow, like if that is how Oregon's going to score, like they're probably not going to put too many drives like that together. And then, of course, Indiana responds with the touchdown. And then they take, like you said, the receivers don't have to be open for Mendoza to find him. He had a couple really nice throws to Surratt. He had that, you know, contested catch to Charlie Becker, and you can go down the list. This Mendoza has a lot of options, and they ran the ball solid, and like you said, Joe, this one was over probably before halftime, and then of course with Indiana getting the ball to start the second half, them making it 42-7. That was pretty much it. Now you mentioned the defensive front. We know Stephen Daly didn't play in either of the playoff games. Mikael Kamara did go down in this one. He didn't appear in the second half, but Signetti says he's all good to go. So I think that was more of a precaution, really. And we didn't really. They kept the starters in for the full game, which I thought was a little bit surprising. But with 11, 12 days until the national championship game. I think you can understand it a little bit, but um, this one was a pretty similar script to the Alabama game. It was over before halftime, and there's probably not a team better suited to protect a big lead than Indiana. With the efficiency, they don't turn the ball over. Like, Oregon got to 20 because Indiana said, okay, you want to take 8 to 10 minutes off the clock here and score a touchdown? Be my guest. But you are going to take half the remaining time to cut the lead from 35 to 28. Like, you can do that. So I think Indiana's execution was really, really good here. I think the fans for the Hoosiers played a big part. Joe, I don't remember off the top of my head a team going to a silent count on a neutral field, which is what Oregon did.
Yeah, especially when it's not like if this was in Indianapolis, I believe the 2022 national title game, 21-22 national title game was in Indy. That'd be the only venue I could imagine that happening, and not the Big Ten title game because as you know, there are plenty of Buckeye fans there too. But from the people I know from work at the game and whatnot, it was not even 90-10. It was probably 95-5. Probably the one sea of green and yellow was the parents and family
Yeah,
section
they
from Oregon.
when they showed the Oregon fans, it was the same group of fans each time, which
Yeah.
makes you think that there may have not been many other ones
They
there.
might have been the paid protester Oregon fans
Yeah,
too.
yeah, the contractually obligated to show face
Yes.
fans. But Mendoza is 17 for 20. He only has to throw it 20 times, 177 and 5 touchdowns. He does have more touchdowns than incompletions in the college football playoff. And then Indiana gets 40 carries for 185, which is 4.6 per carry, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Um, not like a ton of super explosive plays, Joe, but a lot of gashes. Each running back had Mendoza had a 20-yard scamper, Kalon Black, Roman Hemby. They had very few negative plays. And then you have Surratt scoring twice, Becker, Cooper, and Williams scoring two. So this was sort of a full effort offensively from Indiana. And while they did get a few gifted by the Oregon offense, they're still well into the 30s just on their own accord. So I don't think really anybody saw this coming after Oregon shut out Texas Tech the week before. And Texas Tech definitely, like, once they were losing, they could have probably kicked some field goals and not been super reckless when they were down. But, Oregon's defense earned that shutout. And I think conversely, they were just out executed here. And I think three halves of football, Oregon's been out executed this year. That second half in Eugene, and then these two here. They looked really solid this year. Like you said, they were significantly better than the USC's, the Iowas, the upper middle class of the Big Ten, but um, a little bit of a drop off from the top of the country. And there's only one team that they played at the top of the country, but they played them twice, lost them both. Um, you know, the can't hard to beat a good team twice narrative seems to have been broken here, Joe. All the other college football playoff games, which included rematches of similar caliber teams, had the other team winning than that won the regular season outing. Not the case here. Obviously, we'll have an Oregon season recap coming at the end of the season. But Joe, I do want to add one thing in here, and you mentioned it earlier, the Rose Bowl last year. This is now 2 years in a row that Oregon have been absolutely blitzed in the playoffs. Do you think that there's a narrative that's starting to form there?
I think it's undeniable that there's a narrative starting to form. Now, the narrative, let's not misinterpret the narrative either. Oregon's an elite program by standards. They're in the college football playoff consistently, and the 14, they were constantly in the hunt. But I don't think it's a team or a program that cashes in on its good years. I think Oregon consistently has been better than a Michigan and frankly than an LSU. But the problem is LSU and Michigan historically since 2000 cash in on their good years. Michigan cashed in from 21 to 23. Oregon hasn't cashed in yet. I thought last year's Oregon team had the best chance to win a natty, and yes, they definitely got screwed in the sense that they were the one seed having to play the eventual national champion. But I hate saying it, to be the best, you got to beat the best, and the Ric Flair quote, "To be the man, you got to beat the man," kind of holds here. They might end up losing to two straight national champions, but it's not losing. It's just having lost the game and really getting dominated by halftime. I think there's plenty of talent. I think the coordinators are great. I think Lupoy and Stein,
Well, of course
I'd give their
there'll be two new ones next
yeah,
year. Yeah.
there'll be two new ones next year. But my point being, Sean,
Yeah.
to me, it's got to be something to, and I know everyone's going to scream about how Indiana's new. It's got to be something to that Oregon's talent is young and new oftentimes. And, this is Dante Moore's first real year starting. So perhaps you could blame it on that. But it's 2 years in a row. That's a pattern. And the score lines were a lot worse than like 41-22, and then whatever this one was, 56-22. It was more like 56-7 and 41-10.
Yeah, I
So,
believe both of those games were 35-7 in the second quarter at one point, which
yeah.
I mean, against those two teams, I'm not saying every 35-7 lead is definitely protected, but against the defense that Ohio State had last year at Indiana this year, like Oregon got to 22 with some prevent defense. Like they were never going to get to 30 in this game, and they were never going to get to 30 last year against Ohio State. But I think they haven't really cashed in. You're right, Joe. They had some good teams there when it was at Kalen DeBoer, Washington, and I believe they went in, as favorites into some of those
Well, 0 and
Washington
3
games,
against them, 22 and
and
23.
they
0 and
weren't
3.
they weren't outplayed to this extent, but they were significantly outplayed. Um, so who knows if they beat Washington those years, maybe they get a national championship, but they have not come up big in big spots. That's a longer conversation for the season recap video. But Joe, this one was sent a message: Indiana 56, Oregon 22. Any final thoughts here before we call this one a video?
No, I would just say Indiana in the last 2 years of Signetti, I thought the Rose Bowl was their most impressive performance. This by far was their most impressive performance. And, conversely for Oregon, I know it's a lot of the same. It's still a heck of a year to get to the Final Four. I'm not even just trying to be the sympathetic Sal here. It's just really tough when you're gonna play the national title favorite and when you're not favored in any of these games. I will say though, Oregon eventually is going to have to cash in. Let's face it, Sean. You only get so many of these opportunities. If they keep making it here, logic tells you they'll cash in. But getting here, as you know, is no small feat, Sean.
So that is all we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.